Hey everybody, my name is Josh Holder and I'm a student here at UCCS in the CS3050 course, Social and Ethical Implications of Computing. So today we're going to take a deep dive into the critical and challenging ethical landscape of cyber attacks and cybersecurity. My personal interest is the defensive side, or the blue team, and how we uphold our moral and professional duty to protect data without violating privacy. Now, this is a very heavy subject, and I'm sure my fellow cybersecurity students here can agree with, but we'll tackle it by viewing the entire field through an essential lens of ethics. So before we get into it, we should probably state, why is this important? So when we fail in cybersecurity, it means tangible human harm. It means hospitals can't access patient records during an outage, directly jeopardizing lives, which is a failure of availability and integrity. It means personal health information, or PHI, is exposed on the dark web, leading to identity theft and lasting financial destruction. We can't afford to treat security as a checklist. It requires an ethical imperative. Our systems are becoming so complex and the adversaries are so sophisticated, like nation-state actors, that diligence is the moral minimum. So the Blue Team's mandate is enforcement of a social contract, a promise to protect not just corporate assets, but the life, privacy, and public trust that relies on our technology being secure. So this is why studying ethics in this field is mandatory. So part one of our presentation is about defining the situation. Setting the context for our ethical dilemmas, we must first understand the battlefield before we can discuss the defensive ethics of the blue team. So we're going to cover why incidents exist in the first place, looking at core vulnerabilities, the nature of the threat by outlining the major attack types, the mission statement, the CIA triad, the technical foundation of the defense, the security layers and tools, and finally the role of an authorized offense, ethical hacking. So once we establish this as foundation, we will move to the two primary ethical challenges faced by the defensive team. So first, core vulnerabilities and design flaw. Most attacks begin as an exploitation of flaws in our software. Our goal is to enforce secure coding standards to prevent issues like buffer overflows. But the moment an unpatched or unmitigated vulnerability or a zero-day exploit is found, our only immediate ethical and technical choice is often to shut down the service entirely to prevent massive damage. Second, expanded attack surface. The way we conduct business today increases risk. So policies like bring your own device or a BYOD are efficient, but they compromise security by bringing unknown personnel device vulnerabilities into our protected network. This creates a challenging ethical question over data ownership and privacy when our corporate data resides on a personally owned device. And then third, sophisticated threat actors. This isn't about lone hackers. The threat is driven by nation-state actors, which are highly skilled government-sponsored groups capable of running long-term focused campaigns known as Advanced Persistent Threats, or APTs. This elevates our defensive work from simple crime prevention to a matter of national security, creating the absolute necessity of the Blue Team's mandate. So before we discuss the attack themselves, we must define the ultimate goal of cybersecurity. And this is the CIA triad, the core set of goals for all organizational security, and it represents the blue team's fundamental ethical mandate. So confidentiality means preventing unauthorized disclosure of data. The ethical responsibility here is privacy and ensuring that only authorized personnel can ensure sensitive assets. And then we enforce this with tools like encryption and access controls. So think of confidentiality as a special envelope, and only these people can see it and only those people can read it. And then integrity ensures that data has not been changed or altered in an unauthorized manner. And then ethically, this ensures trust and accuracy in our systems, which is vital for financial or medical data. We validate this using technical measures like hashing, which is a visual representation of information from a mathematical algorithm. So if the data's hash has been altered, then it lost its integrity. And then availability means that data, services, and assets are accessible when needed by authorized users. This is upheld through technical solutions like redundancy and fault tolerance, so like array configuration, which is just a backup plan for information in the event of a failure. So the entire mission of the Blue Team is to uphold the trifold duty, giving us the ethical foundation for everything we monitor and protect. So to understand defensive ethics, we categorize attacks by the CIA triad principle they violate. So a violation of availability is the most obvious ethical failure. A denial of service and a distributed denial of service attack are designed to deny legitimate users access to vital systems, whether by crashing a server or flooding communication channel. The ethical failure is preventing authorized users from accessing critical resources. A violation of confidentiality is where the human element is targeted. Such as phishing is the most common example. It is pure social engineering that relies on exploiting human trust to achieve data theft. These attacks violate the fundamental duty of confidentiality by targeting the user directly. Violation of integrity attacks are technical breaches that destroy data trust. When attackers exploit code flaws, like an integer overflow or a SQL injection, they corrupt the accuracy of data or the functionality of an application. The blue team must eliminate these flaws because integrity is the foundation of trust in our digital records. So to defend the CIA triad, the blue team uses defense in depth, multiple layers of defense. This strategy is achieved first through segmentation. Network layer defense is built on zones, so we use firewalls as border guards enforcing the implicit deny rule. This works with intrusion prevention systems like IPSs, which provide an active response such as terminating a malicious session. Application and host defense relies on strong security controls. Encryption enforces confidentiality for data at rest, and we also use salting to add randomness and significantly strengthen user passwords. And then the final layer is the end user. Our duty to implement security education links this technical layer directly to our ethical mandate, making the human factor part of the defense. So before we discuss the dilemmas, we must understand the role of the offense. Ethical hacking, or the red team, is an authorized service. It is a proactive defense because it's an authorized simulation of a real attack, serving the strength of the blue team. This is what distinguishes an ethical hacker or a white hat from a criminal. This authorization is the ethical constraint. The entire process is governed by a document called the Rules of Engagement, or an ROE. Adherence to these rules is non-negotiable as it ensures the test does not violate laws like the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act or the CFAA. The ethical constraint ensures that the simulation remains security assessment and never becomes an illegal operation. So now that we got the technical side established, we're now looking at the core ethical dilemmas faced daily by the blue team. These are not problems with easy solutions. They represent a fundamental conflict between the organization's legal duty to secure its assets and the individual's right to dignity and information. We'll look at two main dualities. The first is the constant conflict between security versus privacy, which centers around network monitoring. And then the second is the high-stakes conflict of transparency versus confidentiality, which defines how we act during a crisis like a data breach. So this is the first major conflict faced by the blue team. Our duty to maintain security is constant, but it inherently clashes with the individual's right to privacy. So the conflict is simple. To detect an attack, the blue team must use tools like a SIEM or Security Information Event Management and aggressively log all network traffic. This is necessary, but it creates pervasive surveillance that risks compromising employees' personal data. This conflict is getting harder with new technology. Consider Bring Your Own Device, or BYOD. When an employee signs that AUP, the company legally gains the ability to wipe corporate data from their personal phone if they are terminated. The ethical dilemma isn't just about reading their emails, it's about company controlling a device they personally own. The risk of exposing PII, personally identifiable information, and PHI, protected health information, is at its highest when we monitor traffic for attack patterns. The ethical mitigation is transparency. We turn monitoring into an ethical act or through acceptable use policy, or AUP. By requiring an employee to sign that AUP, they provide informed consent to the monitoring. This follows ethical principles that govern information management. It justifies the intrusion because the purpose is clearly defined and agreed upon beforehand. The second core dilemma occurs when a breach is confirmed: transparency versus confidentiality. So the crisis is immediate. We have an ethical duty to provide timely notification to affected victims. And this is crucial for maintaining public trust and allowing them to protect themselves. The conflict is releasing details too soon can compromise containment efforts and can teach the attackers how to avoid detection. So we got to balance this transparency with the need to protect the forensic investigation. The ethical and legal mandate shifts to integrity. We got to make sure that any evidence gathered is admissible in court by documenting the chain of custody, which is a chronological record of evidence handling. And then we also got to follow legal hold requests to preserve the data. This entire process is about preserving the ethical and legal trust of the incident. Okay, and finally moving to part 3, ethical strategy and future focus. So this section covers crucial questions a blue team asks before and after an incident occurs. First, developing the ethical framework for prioritization, how to make moral, high-stake decisions when resources are limited. And then second, examining ethical role of training to build a strong, resilient human defense layer. So this slide addresses any crucial question for any blue team. When everything is failing, what do we say first? We have to make high-stakes decisions under extreme pressure. Our first approach must be guided by the ethical framework, and the most practical is non-maleficence, or first do no harm. We justify these decisions using the business impact analysis, or BIA. While BIA often looks at financial loss, the ethical imperative is to prioritize the intangible impact. So to do this, we prioritize minimizing the loss of life, loss of safety, or loss of reputation. For example, identifying that a system controlling oxygen levels in an ICU is the ethical priority over a system hosting a non-critical financial data. This framework ensures that our technical response is aligned with the highest ethical duty to the public and their employees. This means we shift the focus from a financial decision to a social one. So our BIA must identify those non-monetary human-centric systems first, adhering to the principle of a non-maleficence above all else. So this process validates that the blue team's mandate is fundamentally a moral one. And then our final strategic point addresses the human factor, which is the ethical role of training. So we classify security education as a critical layer in end-user security. The ethical imperative here is that we cannot simply rely on technical tools. We got to empower the employee, and which is the final line of the defense. Therefore, training must be designed to build a culture of shared responsibility rather than a culture of blame and shaming those who failed the phishing test. This means that we must implement role-based awareness training. This training must be directly address common ethical and behavioral risks, such as ignoring password requirements or writing them down. We shift from the employees is the weakest link to the employees an essential part of the defense. So to finish off, we got 5 main takeaways. First, the job of the blue team is defined by balancing conflicting principles. We must constantly weigh security versus privacy and transparency versus confidentiality. And then second, vulnerability is an ethical problem. The attacks we see are often successful due to failures in diligence, such as ignoring coding standards or failing to patch known vulnerabilities. And then third, policy is defense. We saw that policies like the acceptable use policy are essential ethical tools. They enforce transparency, giving us necessary consent to monitor systems. And then fourth is integrity is a paramount in a crisis. So during an incident response, maintaining a meticulous chain of custody is not just a procedure, it's an ethical mandate to ensure that the integrity of the evidence is preserved for legal accountability. And then finally, the ethical goal of the blue team transcends into economics. We got to use our ethical frameworks and the business impact analysis to prioritize protecting intangible impacts or human life, safety, and public trust over mere financial assets. So this brings us to our final slide, the reflection questions. So these questions are designed to continue the ethical discussion beyond this presentation, exploring the difficult real-world decisions that don't really have easy answers. So the first question forces us to choose between finance and fundamental rights when prioritizing systems during a crisis. And the question is, pretend that you've been assigned to a security team and have to make a hard choice between a potential data breach. Would you prioritize protecting the personal data of a high-profile investor or the medical records of an average customer? Thinking in an ethical mindset, what led you to your decision? And the second question tests the limits of our monitoring policies and the balance between professional security and individual privacy. And the question is, a company's employees policy states that it can fully monitor its workers. What if the security team found out that an employee had committed a crime outside the organization? Should they tell the police? Why and why not? And the third question asks you to apply the business impact analysis to truly assess the ethical costs of risk in a large organization. And the question is, thinking ethically in a business impact analysis, how should an organization prioritize what is good enough when purchasing security products? If a company can barely afford something like a next generation firewall, is the still reasonable to use it to protect against a high-level incident. Okay, so here's my sources for making this presentation. We have the 2 online courses I took to prepare for the Security Plus exam from ACI Learning and from Pearson on the Riley website. And then we have the 2-week boot camp from August led by Dr. Free from the Intrinsic Cyber Solutions. And then the Security Plus study guide from Daryl Gibson and Joe Shelley, which I got right here. Anyways, thank you guys for watching my presentation. I hope you learned something today. Thanks, guys.